Off-field DPS are, in my opinion, the most valuable type of character in the entire game. Not only do they do a lot of damage while they're off-field, which is the main point of the combat, and often close to, if not as much damage as an on-fielder can do, they can do so while other characters are doing damage off-field and while a character is doing damage on-field. But in addition to that, most off-field units provide a large amount of elemental application, which is very valuable for creating powerful reactions for strong teams. So today, we're going to talk about which of these off-field DPSs are the best and most valuable. The list will not be ordered and it will be subjective. You will disagree. Let me know how in the comments. Welcome to Jello Impact, where we build and test every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. Do you ever buy the Welkin Moon to make sure you don't miss out on your favorite characters? Do you ever top up? What if you could save up to 20% of every single one of these purchases that you ever did? Loot Bar GG is probably my very favorite service that I've ever promoted, because if you're spending money anyways, you can use Loot Bar GG to literally just get the Genesis crystals and Welkin Moon that you were already buying, but you can get it for less. I used to be personally very skeptical about these kinds of services, so I did a test myself completely independent from the sponsorship, and I bought the $100 pack. This normally would cost me 134 Canadian dollars, but as you can see, buying the exact same pack cost me $104 only. That's a huge saving, and I don't think I'll ever buy it directly from Genshin again. There's a variety of ways to pay. I did that transaction securely through PayPal, and although they guarantee that you'll get your Genesis crystals within 30 minutes, I received mine in just 15. And new users can use my link to get a further discount, so if you're already spending money on Genshin, there's no reason to not use Loot Bar GG. So go check it out now and keep some more money in your pocket. I'm gonna go relatively in the order of release, starting with Xiangling. Now, I don't think Xiangling is quite as prevalent and quite as potent as she once was, due to the fact that in the past, she was basically part of every top team, and now there are a ton of other options. And she does have downsides that people are quick to point out, such as her reliance on Bennett, but the fact is, pyro reactions are extremely important and powerful, and she is the only reliable off-field pyro elemental applicator while doing a ton of elemental damage. In addition, although she does rely on Bennett to maximize her teams, there's just a ton of teams that you want to put Xiangling on that you already want to use Bennett on, which means that her reliance on Bennett becomes a non-factor on those teams. Xiangling's Pyro NATO burst has no internal cooldown, which means every time it hits the enemy, it applies Pyro and can trigger a Vaporize, an Overloaded, or a Burgeon, and it just makes her valuable and very useful in a ton of teams. Not to mention she's free. You get her for free just from getting to a certain point in the Spiral Abyss, and her C4 is a massive increase to her overall power, and being available in the shop and from the Leeway Lanternrite Festival every year, it's absolutely guaranteed that you can eventually make use of this constellation, even if you get unlucky and don't get her from the standard banner or as a rate up on some other banner. Overall, although she's maybe not SSSSS's plus tier like some of the characters on this list, almost every account is going to benefit from using her. She has a ton of great weapon options, one of which being a free one. She utilizes almost any 5-star weapon in the game very well, and has other options depending on what stats you're needing, plus having access to multiple great artifact sets, including Emblem, but can also just use many great 2-piece options if you have to. Overall, just an incredible character. Next on the list, we have to talk about Fischl. Like Xiangling, Fischl has always been a very strong character, but rather than kind of being pushed out of the meta, Fischl has embraced many new tools that have come out, such as Dendro and the new Golden Troop artifact set. By utilizing both her skill and her burst, she can have permanent uptime on her off-field applicator, that is Oz, and also similar to Xiangling, although she does have ICD on her attacks, the most important part of her kit, her Ascension 4 passive, doesn't have ICD at all, which means that it can proc an aggravate reaction every single time it hits, which is going to be often because there are a ton of great on-field electro applicators such as Yaimiko, Keqing, etc. She also similarly has a ton of great weapon options, whether it be 4-star or 5-star. She can slot into so many teams that just need a 4th slot. Fischl can always be there, whether it's Hyper Bloom, Hu Tao. Of course, aggravate teams are almost always built directly around her. She works great on Novelette teams. She's not always an optimal choice, but because she doesn't rely on energy energy recharge. As long as you can utilize the electro element, Fischl can go on your team. In addition, she provides a ton of energy, so she's actually something of a battery to your team. And although she works great with a two-piece, she got a pretty massive 10 to 15% increase from the Golden Troop artifact set, which I think most players of Fontaine characters are going to be farming a lot. Similar to Xiangling, I wouldn't put her maybe in the SSSSS plus tier like the other characters that I'm going to put on this list, but she's again an incredible character that pretty much every account should build. She can be gotten for free from the shop. Fischl is awesome. I guess technically Xingqiu is before Fischl on the release, but they're released at the same time. So we'll do Xingqiu next. And I'm actually going to cheat here because I'm going to talk about Xingqiu and Yelan at the same time, both sharing this slot in the top 5 list. Why? They're basically the same character. Both Xingqiu and Yelan provide a ton of off-field hydro damage from off-field in the form of their burst. They both have pretty much the same energy cost when you factor everything in. They both require normal attacks, and with normal attacks, they provide a coordinated 3-prong attack, which does have ICD, but because they're sending out 3 attacks at the same time, one of them will always apply Hydro. Both of these characters add a huge amount of damage to the team, and of course, applying Hydro is extremely good because Hydro is the best element in the game, so they are also catalysts to very powerful reactions. Although they have high energy needs, they can easily be mitigated by running them together, as they both synergize extremely well and form one of the strongest cores in Genshin, double Hydro, and feed off each other's energy needs while also both working with Furina, who we'll talk about in a minute, of course. Basically, the only difference is Yelan provides more damage while Xingqiu provides more defensive utility and a slight amount more hydro application, but practically speaking, they're the same character, both extremely powerful and extremely valuable to build for any team, well, almost any team and for every account. They work with Vaporize, Hyper Bloom, but also work with hyper carries like Wanderer or various other DPSs like Raiden. They can work on Mono Hydro. They can work with Nilou, with Burgeon. These characters have virtually endless synergies and are definitely in the very top and arguably the very best characters in the game. And for number 2, it is the Dendro core. I thought really long and hard about who I wanted to include on this list, because of course Nahida is a great off-field damage dealer. She definitely could be included on this list, but her best potential isn't even her buffing, it's her Dendro application. More often than not, on basically every team except for like Alhaitham Spread, her value is creating Dendro cores. Similarly to Nilou, I could call her an off-field DPS, but really she's sort of a buffer. But what is she really buffing? Does she buff the other Hydro on your team and is then therefore Kokomi the off-field DPS? That didn't seem quite right. Is Kuki an off-field DPS? Sort of, but really what she's doing is just applying Electro to the Dendro core, which is actually doing the damage. Same story with Toma, same story with Raiden if you use her in Hyper Bloom. So yes, the Dendro core is my number 2 for this list, which is again not ordered, just in the order of release. The Dendro core is an insane off-field DPS, hitting 10k, 12k, 15k Hyper Blooms and Burgeons, or Nilou Bloom explosions. It can be single target, it can be AoE, synergizes with the best off-field supports and on-field supports in the game and DPSs in the game, such as Yelan or Nahida, Furina. It can work with Fischl. Until sort of Neuvillette and Furina came around, the Dendro core really shaped the meta completely all around itself, and to this day is still the main component of lower investment accounts, is the main component of those strongest teams. Dendro core, SSS plus tier, amazing off-field DPS. Before we go into number 1, I want to give some love to other off-field DPS that, although didn't make the list, are extremely strong. As I said, off-field DPS is one of the most, if not the most valuable role in the game. A character like Kaya, who can just snapshot his burst, do off-field cryo damage, reverse melt with Xiangling or another character, is just so good. Even Lisa, her burst is very useful on Raiden teams, on aggravate teams, although she's a bit more on-field than aggro teams. But like Beto, right? She easily could have made this list and would probably be the 6th slot. Probably. I'm not really sure. I didn't really think about who would be next after that, but I could easily see her being on a list like this, especially if she just did more damage when in single target scenarios. But like just the fact that you're an off-field DPS already puts you in the upper echelon of characters. Like even Chongyun, who doesn't use much field time, can work with other off-field DPS or on-field DPS. And then there's characters that are almost off-field DPSs, like Jean. That's not her main role, but the fact that she does that damage is nice, although now with Furina, really healing is the main thing. Albedo, a really solid character who you can just slot into a lot of teams to add damage. Ganyu has an awesome burst that can be used off-field in freeze or mono cryo. Usually you want to be utilizing her charge shots, but she can work great as an off-field. Rosaria, very similar to Kaya. I think Kazuha is really underrated with how much damage he does off-field with his burst, whether it's an aggravate, whether it's an doing overloaded damage in like Ride and Hyper Carry or something like that. Really underrated off-field DPS. Someone like Yaimiko, who is again that sort of off-field, on-field hybrid. Ayato, you can build him just for his burst, not usually optimal. Genshin overall is very scared of releasing a ton of off-field DPS characters. Like there's more on-field than off-field because they are so potent and can easily become broken. Most of the pure dedicated off-field DPS, like a lot of the ones I pointed out, like Ganyu, their main role isn't even off-field DPS. But when a character has that as part of their kit, it instantly like rises them up on the tier list because of how much more flexible it makes them. Let me know if you think any of these should have been in the top 5. And now let's go on to number 1. But number 1, I do think it's possible she is actually number 1 and the strongest off-field damage dealer in the game right now. But I think it's still possible that it's actually the Dendro core or that it's Xingqiu and Yelan that are the real number 1. But she's definitely the most recently released, so it's Furina. I've tested Furina a ton, and similarly to Xingqiu and Yelan, she does just a ton of off-field hydro damage. She has 3 minions that summon that all attack, and she applies a little less hydro, but as long as you have a healer on your team, they do a ton of damage. She also does a ton of buffing, which means that she synergizes extremely well with other off-field damage dealers. So Xingqiu and Yelan and Fischl and even Xiangling all get massive buffs because she, like most buffers, only buff the on-field character, but she buffs everyone all the time. People really underestimate how much damage she actually does. The amount of damage and buffing she gives makes it so your final slot can be a healer that basically does no damage at all, and the overall team damage is still higher than what it would have been. Furina is an insane character. She's definitely more restricted to her specific artifact set, but she can still use a variety of free-to-play friendly weapons, whether it be Festering Desire if you have it, or Favonia's Sword. She works in basically every Hydro team. Some people call her a bit more restrictive than someone like Xingqiu or Yelan, but also keep in mind she doesn't require normal attacks to proc her Hydro application and damage, so although she does require that healer, she is in a sense even more flexible because often teams will require a healer anyways, or they have the ability to run something like Prototype Amber with a kind of weaker healer, greatly improving her flexibility. But yeah, that is the final list. Let me know if you disagree in the comments. Let me know which characters of these you have. I think that by and large, every account should build these characters. I don't think any of these characters are must builds for an account, but I think they're all extremely strong builds. So you can definitely take this video and say, I'm going to build these characters. And honestly, if you build these characters, there's no reason that you're going to ever struggle in the Abyss. Along with these characters in your favorites, they work with so many characters. If you have them available, no matter what happens in the Abyss, you're going to be able to pair them up with your favorite characters, create awesome teams, and have a ton of fun with the game, because that is the point of the game. I think off-field DPSs really unlock the potential of your account to make different teams, and that really is the fun of Genshin Impact. So let me know your thoughts. Check out my video of the top 5 on-field DPSs right here. Thanks again to lootbar.gg for sponsoring the video. Make sure to check them out the next time you need to make Genshin purchases. Completely safe, completely free. Click the link down below. It really helps me out as well. It's sponsors like these that allow me to do this full time for you. So thanks a lot. Bye for now.